Welcome to Caregiving Club On Air. This podcast is dedicated to the millions of family caregivers who want wellness tips and self-care solutions, who seek expert advice, and who want news about healthy aging and how to create well home design in our forever homes. I'm Sherri, a corporate gerontologist, author, and educator, a TV interviewer, host, and news commentator. I'm joining you from Southern California, where our interviews and news take us all across the country to explore the many ways to help you on your caregiving journey and to lift you up here at Caregiving Club On Air. Welcome to Caregiving Club On Air. I'm your host, Sherri, and boy, have we got a jam-packed February episode for you. We're going to kick all of this off with a great interview with Barbara Sullivan, who is the executive director of the VtV Network. You're going to learn all about this great movement in how we're going to keep our older loved ones at home, living there as long as possible, and how that also helps out those of us who are family caregivers. And then turning to February 21st, which is National Caregivers Day, we're going to focus on some of the recent studies around caregiver stress, but also how do we prevent the stress? How do we bring that balance back into life? That's the tough part, right? So we're going to tell you about some tools and some different things that are out there. We're also going to focus on February's National Heart Health Awareness Month, as well as February National Cancer Month. And again, we're going to share with you some calculators, some trends, also some information that will help you to prevent heart disease and also cancer. And then February is also National Library Month, and there's something interesting I came across I wanted to share with all of you, and it's called social rewilding. Now, what is that? Well, we're going to tell you all about it, and we're also going to tell you why this connects to February National Library Month. And then turning to our Well Home Design news, we're going to bring you the latest trends out of the big, huge kitchen and bath show that is in Las Vegas every year. And we've got some interesting trends that really follow what we talk about in Well Home Design. We're also going to talk about a trend called the cozy home communities, which are just starting to, kind of get going. We're going to tell you what those are. And then finally, I'm just going to do a little shout out and a little plug for the Snug Home, which was a blog that I started about 5 years ago. And guess what? The Snug Home is now the trend. I'm going to share with you some information about how the Snug has really taken off, and I'm excited about it because I'm working on my third book, which is called The Snug Home for Family Caregivers, and it's all about well home design. But we're going to talk about that trend and what it means for you in both your home as well as the home for your older loved ones. So since we're going to start with Caregiver Wellness News, let's kick this off. We'll take a deep dive into February 21st, National Caregiver Day. So for our Caregiver Wellness News on February 21st, we now celebrate National Caregivers Day. And so I am sending a big shout out to the 53 million family caregivers out there who are caring for an adult, an older loved one. And we know that, sometimes that journey can be long, it can be challenging. And certainly it brings about a certain level of stress. And stress is something that, we talk about a lot. All of the work that I've really been doing in caregiving in the last 20 years is focused around the impact of stress on family caregivers. How do we mitigate that? How do we manage through it? How do we find that balance back in our lives? We know it's tough. And I think the biggest thing that I've seen over the years is that it's not really about the care that we're delivering to our loved ones. It's about all the other things that go along with it. It's about navigating through this fragmented healthcare system, not knowing what you don't know. I mean, there's so many things out there, so many solutions, tools, programs, but how do you even know they exist, right? You'd have to spend hours and hours and hours on the internet doing research, and you don't have that kind of time. And so, again, just want to do a shout out to everything that you do as family caregivers. And I think one of the things that we need to focus, more intently on, and I know that there's wonderful advocacy organizations out there, so many that I can't list them all, but I'll just do a quick shout out to Caregiver Action Network, National Alliance for Caregiving, the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregivers, the National Family Caregiver Support Program, which is part of the Department of Health and Human Services under the Administration for Community Living, the Arch National Lifespan Respite Network, US Aging. I mean, on and on. There's a lot of resources out there, but very often, heck, we don't know about those, right? You become a family caregiver, you have no idea that these things exist. I know because I've been doing this for 20 years. So I try to share as much as I can with you on these podcasts. But it's worth taking a look at and also giving yourself a lot of kudos and telling yourself, wow, I am really doing this Herculean effort, because again, it isn't just the loving care that we give to our loved one. It is about becoming, and this was a recent study, by the way, that came out in the Gerontologist, and it identified all of the roles really that family caregivers play. So you're a care manager, right? You're taking on, this lack of transparency, this fragmentation of all the systems and everything out there, kind of this opaque healthcare and long-term care system. So you're managing all the different services and care and needs of your loved one outside of just that direct, being able to help them with whatever their needs are. You're a researcher. You're a caregiving researcher. You're digging, you're hunting. And again, sometimes you may not even know the questions to ask or where to go to find the answers, particularly when it comes to things like technology solutions or other services that are out there. Now, there are some organizations that do help guide you. US Aging, we talked to Sandy Markwood a couple podcasts ago. That's a great organization that can help guide you to some things. But even at that, there may be some little nuances, some newer things that are out there that they may not necessarily have listed, or it may not be available locally, or there is something different locally for you. So it's a lot of digging and hunting, and care coordination, right? You're pushing and navigating and advocating and fighting and, trying to figure out what is the best care for your loved one, whether that's a medical device that they need, something as simple as getting compression socks and getting a good answer out of a healthcare professional about, what the needs are. It's unfortunate that our healthcare system isn't more in tune with not just treating the body, but treating the lifestyle, right? What are the needs that this person will need to have quality of life and all those other things. So again, I just want to recognize the role that family caregivers play, because it is tremendous. You are the backbone, the largest volunteer army nationally in our long-term care army. But there's no boot camp for you. There's no training. Certainly there's no pay. And, not a whole lot of supports that way. But we're going to do as much as we can to kind of help you navigate and figure this out. So saying all of that, I think one of the things that we can really do, and I'm seeing this starting to percolate now within the workplace with employers, is one of the things that's rising to the top of the needs for employees who are caregiving is, I need somebody that's almost like a caregiving concierge, right? I need a navigation point. I need to have someone I can call and say, here's my problem today. Because your problems are going to change over time. We know that through care transitions and through the stages of perhaps a loved one's diagnosis, like something like Alzheimer's, which gets progressively worse and changes dramatically through the stages of that disease, you're going to need a constant, refresher and a constant go-to source that can say, okay, here's what you need to think about now, or here's what you need to prepare for, because this will be kind of the next step, or have you thought about this? So I think that is probably the number one thing that any organization can do, is just helping with that care coordination. Very often we're trying to train caregivers to be paraprofessional healthcare, nurses and social workers and all this other stuff, which is fine. But what you really need is to find those professionals who can help you out. And then we hit the costs, right? There's the financial side of it too. How do I pay for this? What's covered? What's not covered? How do I navigate that? So if we just had that 1-800-caregiver number that we could call, I've been talking about this now for 20 years. I should have started it years ago, right? But if we had that, that's going to go a long way to relieving the stress. It's going to take the burden off of you to do all the research. It's going to take the burden off of you to not be beholden to know what you don't know, to be on top of all of these new technology solutions, which there's a new one every minute that comes out, or there's new programs, or there's new ways to save money. And so there's all this different stuff that goes on. And if we just had someone we could call that would guide us, I think personally, I think that's the number one thing that we ought to be doing for caregivers, whether it's through employers, or whether it's through, certain healthcare systems, maybe through insurance or whatever it is. That to me seems to be the biggest thing. So I'm doing a big shout out to all the organizations and HR directors and everybody else out there that I think that would be really helpful for family caregivers and take a lot of that stress burden off of having us have to manage everything. We're still going to be at the center of our loved ones' care. We're still going to have to coordinate maybe some of this stuff, but at least if we could be guided to it, and then have a little bit of confidence that, okay, this is a trusted source, so I'm going to trust this particular referral or whatever it is. I think that would be great. Also, just really quickly, for those of you who are interested, I'm going to do a blog on the language of care because it's changing. The words like care partners, what's happening in the workplace. We're not supposed to talk about generations anymore, which is fine because I think my Gen Z caregiver, the generation caregiver, actually goes across all those different age demographic generations. But anyway, there's some interesting things that are happening. And one of the things I wanted to point out to you, and this goes back to doing your research on the internet, is that the word elderly is in ixnayed. Okay, it is no longer a word we're supposed to be using. Elder is okay because that kind of connotes a sage person, a wise person who has spent their years building up all this experience that they can share with us. But elderly tends to connote someone who's more frail, more vulnerable, certainly maybe in decline, all the things that we don't really want to associate with aging. And it's not like we're trying to be Pollyanna, and we're not trying to gaslight people and say, hey, that doesn't happen. Of course it does as we get older and depending on our health status and our health situation. But what we don't want to do, and it's, I'm going to call out the media, and I think I've said this before, the media is probably the biggest offenders. One of the things I would love to do, I would love to be hired by all these different media networks and other people that are out there to just come in and give them a little overview of what this world of aging and caregiving is all about. I think they would be a little bit more sensitive, but they're the biggest offenders in using the word elderly. And what I love is they're starting to connect it to people who are like 50 or 60. I doubt that any of you out there listening who might be in your 50s or 60s feels elderly. No, I don't. So anyway, I'm going to share with you the new language of care. And what's interesting is the National Council on Aging and Google teamed up to change the algorithms on a Google search so that when you put in elderly care services or whatever it is, elder care, it is actually not going to come up as high in your search, not going to have as many options, I guess, as something like older adults. Now, there's two sides to this. A lot of people feel like, oh, well, that's just like completely manipulating, search and words that we use and all that. And that could be probably, certainly that's true. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to kind of evolve the industry away from those words that kind of have a little bit more of a negative connotation to them and get us to, search for some of these other terms. So I'm going to share all that with you. Like it, don't like it, whatever. You can always email me, give me your comments, and I'll talk about them on the next podcast. But I am going to share with you what's being done out there so you know that when you're doing some searches, you may want to use certain words or terms that just don't necessarily come to mind. It's not going to be maybe the first word or term that you would think of. Now, as I mentioned, February is also Library Lovers Month. I love that because I love libraries and books, as you all know. In fact, there's a famous quote from Thomas Jefferson, "I cannot live without books." I absolutely agree. And, I'm going to have a link to my blog on reading nooks that you can create in your home that kind of become a little bit of a cozy sanctuary for you as a caregiver. Also, just wanted to remind you that I think I've talked about this before, but one of the early signs of Alzheimer's disease is if an older loved one who loves to read, and particularly loves to read like maybe biographies or fiction, novels where they have to follow the character storyline. If they stop reading those types of books, as they get a little bit older. That can be an early sign of Alzheimer's. And the reason why is they can't follow the storylines and the characters anymore because of the memory loss, that we aren't imprinting those memories into a long-term memory. It's a short-term memory that, completely gets erased, if you will, and just escapes them. So it's just a little clue out there for those of you who have loved ones who may also be, reading lovers. But there's something interesting. So a lot of the big analyst research companies like Deloitte and Accenture and Ipsos and all these others, I've been reading all of their global trends for 2025. And one of the ones that came out from Accenture was called social rewilding. I thought, what the heck is that? So here it is. People who are increasingly seeking depth, authenticity, and sensory, we talk a lot about the five senses, right? Sensory richness in their experiences, aiming to engage with the world in meaningful ways. This is reflecting a renewed desire to reconnect with nature. Hello, my book already 2 years, and now they're finally talking about it. I just like to say that. And each other, and people who are seeking balance between technology and moments of joy and well-being. Oh, this is like a blurb for my book, right? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, okay. Do you think they read my book? I don't know. Maybe I was just like, I was on top of this trend that they were going to write about in 2 years after my book came out. Anyway, it's very nice. I feel validated. So here's what Accenture said. We found that 42% of people attributed their most enjoyable experience in the past week to something they did in real life, while only 15% noted a digital experience. Okay. So this shift presents organizations with opportunities to rethink their roles and align with people's growing desire for more immersive and authentic experiences. And I would add to that, in real life. I talked about in the book going from URL, the digital experience, to IRL, in real life. And I think that's what we're all seeking, right? I wrote in my book about the Luddite Club. This is a club of teenagers in New York who basically come to parks like Bryant Square Park, which is near the New York City Public Library. They have somebody who kind of collects their phones. It's kind of this group that meets. And so they're away from their phones. They go into the library, get a book. Maybe they paint, sketch each other, play a musical instrument, whatever it is, talk, just have great conversation over coffee. It's really kind of an interesting movement because I feel like we can't get away from the technology. We have to use it in our lives. It's essential. We also need to disconnect from it, occasionally, go back to the human experience and the multisensory experiences that we have in life and really engaging and immersing in those. So interesting. So this is what they're calling it now, social rewilding. I don't know why rewilding. They didn't really explain that very well to me, so I'm not sure I get that, because that kind of sounds almost like some, like you're going to go out and do some nefarious activity. Wilding? I don't know. Anyway, just be more social, I guess, is what we're saying. And then I was super excited because, again, as you guys know, I'm a lover of books, and I read a news blurb. I think it was just last fall. Barnes & Noble is going to open more stores. I have been I'm going to chain myself to the front door of Barnes & Noble near me. It's one of the big, huge anchor stores. And it's so wonderful. And I just love going in there. I like to visit at least once a week, visit the books and just browse. But I can't do that online. I just don't connect with that online. So anyway, not to say that I don't buy books off Amazon, because I do, but I do try to support Barnes & Noble and the books and the little independent bookstores too. I love the little independent bookstores, and they're cropping up again. So the independent bookstores are coming back. So that's an exciting trend that I like to see. And it's also because they're a form of where we can go to socialize, right? We can meet friends there. Now there's, coffee is always embedded now in a lot of these stores. Or right next door, there might be a little coffee place or something. So again, it's part of this getting back to connecting with friends and having a more robust in real life social life. Now, February is also Heart Health Month. I just want to do a quick shout out to my mom because she was a really great sport. We put on our red knit beanies that have little white hearts on them, and took a photo of ourselves to post for Go Red for Women Day, which is February 7th, and that's to raise awareness around heart health. And of course, in my family, we do have risk factors for heart disease as well as stroke. And so knowing your family history is really, really important because now you might have a greater risk. How do you manage that? I just wanted to read you really quickly some stats. So the death rates from cardiovascular disease have declined since 1950. That's the good news. But it is still the number one killer of women and men today. And almost half of Americans over age 20, that's about 128 million people, are suffering from coronary heart disease, heart failure, stroke risk, or had a stroke, and or have hypertension. It's a big percentage. So we still have a lot of ways to go to kind of manage that to reduce our risk for heart disease. Now, when we talk about risk, smoking has declined. Again, the big campaigns that started back in the 60s. For those of you who watched Mad Men on television, that was one of the big episodes when everybody went against the cigarette companies and tobacco companies. But only 24% of U.S. adults meet national recommendations for physical activity. So yeah, we're not smoking as much, but our physical activity, we're not doing that as much either. And again, that's kind of tied to the technology, right? We're all tethered inside to our computers, tablets, smartphones, whatever it is. And so again, what's good for your heart is also good for your brain health. Very often, all of the things that we can do in terms of lifestyle changes are good for both. So that'll reduce your risk of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Also, again, family caregivers are at more risk because of the stress that we keep and that releases cortisol, which creates inflammation, which causes all these bad things in our body. So we really do need to find those times to de-stress. And part of that is doing something like the green exercise movement I read about in my book, eating the rainbow, which is also from my book, staying socially fit, do your social rewilding activities. And it only takes 7 minutes a day. So that's the big part of what my book is all about, Me Time Monday. Also, National Cancer Prevention Month is in February. I talked about this, I think, last year, but it's worth bringing it up again because I think it's really important. Two things. One, there is a test for a variety of cancers. Now, it's almost $1,000. I know that's a lot. Check with your insurance, maybe if it could be covered. I don't know. It is a preventive test because it's called Galleri. Galleri. I'm going to have a link on the episode guide page. But if you're over age 50, it can catch certain cancers early. And there's a lot of people who, they want to know that. They do body scans and things like that. So the American Association of Cancer Research, I'll have that link on the website. You can check that out if you're interested in doing that. The other thing is, just statistically, 2 million Americans were diagnosed with cancer last year, and that it does not include non-melanoma skin cancer. So if it was benign, it's not included in that number. And more than 600,000 people died from various cancers. And again, similar with Alzheimer's, where we show that if we can change some of our lifestyle choices, we're going to reduce our Alzheimer's risk by 40%. Same thing with cancers. If we don't smoke, if we watch our, wine intake, if we watch our nutrition, if we move, if we stay physically active and don't get lonely, if we manage our stress and don't have anxiety and depression, if we do all those things, we can actually prevent cancers as well by 40%. So it's an interesting thing that both the Alzheimer's and the cancers, 40% just by lifestyle changes. And if you're interested in taking your cancer prevention quiz to see where you shape up right now, test your knowledge on cancer risk, I'm going to have a link on the episode guide page to that too. And then just really quickly shout out on, we're doing our self-care in 7 minutes video series now. We're going to have 4 of those for the month of February. We're going to have the heart breathing method, which is a really great way to de-stress by calming your vagus nerve being the longest nerve in your body, goes from the base of your neck all the way down your spine to almost at the end of your spine. We're going to tell you how to do that. We also are going to have one on sleep science and the benefit of daydreaming. One on social convoys. So again, kind of connecting to this social wilding thing, social convoys, and also reading to escape stress and also help us be more creative in tackling some solutions that we need in life. And then again, a thank you to caregivers for National Caregiver Day. And we'll have some tips and things on, again, more de-stress techniques for caregivers. So those will be our self-care in 7 minute videos, and we'll have those links on the episode guide page. So now, with all of that great wellness news, we are going to turn to this wonderful interview with Barbara Sullivan, who's the executive director of the Village to Village Network. It's really interesting because I wrote about the VtV Network in my first book, Cast of Caregivers, almost 12 years ago. I can't believe it was that long ago. And they have been growing strong ever since. But this is a great way if our loved ones want to stay living in their homes, but we know we got to make some changes, right? Home modification, other things. But also, they're going to just need help doing certain things. How do we do that? What's an easy kind of way to do that? And this VtV Network is a great solution. Now, some of you may have heard of the Villages, and I want to just be really clear. The Villages is an active senior living community in Florida. So you may have heard of that. That is not what this is. The Village to Village Network is actually a way to stay in your own home versus moving into a senior living community, and to do that so that you get the support that you need. And it's really great for family caregivers to know about, because whether you live close or far away, you can really help your loved one to obtain that dream by tapping into the Village to Village Network. So with that, here's my interview with Barbara Sullivan. So I'm really delighted to have our guest on this episode because I have written about the Village to Village Network. I have, back in the days, 12 years ago, I think it was, that my first book came out, and I had identified the Village to Village Network as one of those really great resources for both older adults and family caregivers. So I'm delighted to have Barbara Sullivan, who is the executive director of the Village to Village Network. Barbara, welcome to Caregiving Club on Air.
Well, thank you, Sherri. I'm so delighted to be here.
It's great to talk to you and to catch up. As I said, it's been a while, and I've kind of followed all the activities, and I was thrilled to get you on this podcast in February, because I noticed that I think it was President Biden who declared February 15th as National Village Day. So you have your own day now.
We do. It's so exciting. It's based on our first village that opened in Boston, Beacon Hill Village, which opened in 2002. So,
yeah.
And we're very excited. We're very excited.
Yeah, very. Well, before we, dive into all the great details about what you're doing, we always ask our guests where we're talking to you from today.
I love that question, since we're a virtual office. I'm actually at the Jersey Shore, just south of Atlantic City, in a little town called Ventnor. But our national headquarters is in St. Louis, Missouri. So I have staff scattered throughout the country. Well,
that's kind of why we love to ask these questions, because we love talking to people all over the country. And now, as you said, we've really gotten into these virtual offices where you could really be talking to anybody from anywhere. So Jersey Shore, how's your weather, by the way, today?
It's a little windy, a little cold. We're supposed to get some serious accumulations over the weekend, so we'll see. Being at the beach, we don't always get snow, more like ice, but we'll see. We've had quite a winter already.
Oh my gosh. I live on the beach, but on the opposite coast, and I can't imagine there being snow on the beach. But
it's anyway, I mean,
yeah, definitely. I was going to say, I kind of like that. So, Barbara, I want our listeners to learn all about what you're doing, and it's such an exceptional model, this village model that you have created. So, tell us a little bit about what that model entails, and what are the real benefits for both the older adults who are residents who want to stay in their homes as long as possible, and also for their family caregivers.
Excellent question. I guess I have to go back 25 years ago. We are celebrating 25 years of this movement. And there was a group of homeowners in Boston that decided they wanted to change the paradigm of aging. And how do you do that? How do you stay in your home? What do you need? What support services? And this concept evolved into a model, a very grassroots model for aging in place and in community. And fast forward, villages are grown from the communities they serve. So when you see one village, you see one example of a village. There's many characteristics of villages that are similar, but everybody is unique. Every village is very unique. And the support services alone that a village offers is huge as we age in our homes and in the community. We know, and I should say that most of our villages operate on volunteer first, so we incorporate people in the community to help each other. So neighbor helping neighbor. And it's from, helping with, like we just talked about snow, maybe snow shoveling or helping, get out the door, to one of the biggest things that we need in our country is transportation for people, older adults. And this is, a model where you can call an office or call a volunteer and get a ride to the doctor, get a ride to the grocery store, get groceries delivered. And it's to help support independence within the home. But more importantly, it's also another way to keep people socially connected. As we age, we really need that social interaction. I have said for many years, well, I shouldn't say many years, but the last couple of years, that villages not only survive COVID, we thrive during COVID. Because of the grassroots model, we were able to hunker down. Yeah, did we have to stop transportation services and in-person events? Yes. But we were able to connect with, villages just dug in. They, their boards, their members, they called each other, they supported each other. We had such an uptick of volunteerism within, communities because everybody was at home and they were looking for purpose and things to do. And so it really, we really survived. I didn't lose any villages during COVID. As I said, we shut down, but we taught older adults how to use, electronic devices. We used, we were able to get in, through, telephones or through Zoom like this, teaching older adults how to Zoom or do telehealth, which was huge during, the pandemic, because a lot of our older adults need to see their doctors, and it's a comforting thought that you can still reach them, even though you can't be in person.
Well, and you unpacked so much for us there. And I think, again, going back to when I look at the statistics, I think it's pretty steady around the fact that 89%, almost 9 in 10 older adults want to stay living in their home as long as possible. And it's really difficult, I think, when you've lived in a community or a neighborhood, maybe for 40 or more years, and then to think that you might have to leave that neighborhood. And I know it's daunting for a lot of people, those kinds of changes. So to be able to stay, there's something I want our audience to hear about, because I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that there sometimes are these they call them NORCs, natural occurring retirement communities. And what that means is there might be a street or, again, a community in a city where, there's people who've lived there for a long, long time. And that's really kind of the impetus, right, for the village movement and for this model to begin. Right. So tell us, how exactly does it work? Because is there, you said it's volunteer, a lot of it's volunteer, but is there a formal concierge or administrator that you can call for all the maybe different services and things you might need?
So every village is different, and the services they provide are different, but they all, as I said before, the characteristics, it's usually one telephone number you call and you say, I need a ride to the doctor, or I need somebody to come over, I need a friend, you asked about caregiving, I need a friendly visitor, or I just need to go out and do some errands for my husband's home here, and he just would love to have somebody to come in and talk to him, so the support services. But it's one stop. Most of villages are that way. The structure, I'd say 60% of our villages are, have at least 1 to 2 FTEs, full-time employees that help do, the service requests and the programs. 40% of our villages are all volunteer. So they have call managers, which is basically somebody who takes, the telephone call and they, do it weekly or every other day, or how they do their schedule. But at the end of the day, it's all about, the request and the programs and keeping people really engaged and active.
Yeah, which is, you mentioned the social side of it, which I think we sometimes overlook when our older parents or grandparents are maybe struggling with, chronic disease or recovering from, a surgery or something. We're so focused on the physical. We tend to forget some of that emotional and social side of things. And I think this really takes us back to, I don't want to say the olden days, but the days when we did know our neighbors and we were interacting more. It's kind of forcing back into that type of model. Tell us, you mentioned transportation, but what are some of the various services? Because I know it, as you said, it's very personalized. It could be anything, but give us a sense of what are some of the other things that that the Village Network might be able to coordinate or help out the residents with.
Oh, sure. Well, to maintain independence as we get older, little things just get a little harder. Like a light bulb's out and you'd have to get on a ladder. So you have volunteers that will come in and replace a light bulb in your kitchen or in your bathroom. I call them the honey-do list, where you need a little bit of help. I'm not talking, plumbing and, electrical, but I'm talking the simple things. A great example is we just came out of the holidays and, I ran a village for 10 years. My old village used to send the volunteers and we'd go to our members and say, anybody want to get their holiday decorations out? We'll send a volunteer over and they'll get all your, boxes out of the attic or out of the basement. And so they were able to participate and engage in their own holiday, which was great. I mean, we even had volunteers that would go buy a Christmas tree for them and put it up. So again, it's just the support. Technology is always a very big component of being able to be active and learning how to navigate this or online banking. Not that our volunteers are doing banking for our folks, but showing how to get into a program. Or everybody wants to know, we all have the smartphones. How do I download a picture? So it's, I just took a picture of my grandchild and I want to have it, I want to send it to CVS so I can have it print out, but I don't know how to do that. Things like that to just keep people really, really connected. And I mentioned the honey-do list, but it's also outside work, like winterizing hoses and, as simple as, maybe taking out the trash barrels because you can't really, it's too steep. And then I mentioned transportation, but it's also shopping, home shopping, somebody who, may need some shopping. They're not as mobile as, they'd like to be. And so having volunteers doing shopping, weekly, which is great. Again, it's being connected. Our volunteers also, transport for social programs, so.
Yeah, I think I read about that with the Beacon Hill village that they would get, a little minibus or van or something, take them to some concerts if anyone was interested or whatever culturally was going on in the city, which is fantastic.
And I did mention the friendly visitor, but it is, the little companion to come, whether you're alone or you have a spouse, it's really the connection of homebound folks, to being able to have a friendly visitor come in.
Yeah. And, from the family caregiver perspective, I mean, even if you lived within the same city, but you've got this busy life, maybe you've got, kids and those schedules are crazy. There's such peace of mind in knowing that your loved one doesn't have to just rely on you, that there is this wonderful service. And I imagine for the long distance caregivers, if you're living maybe a few states away or across the country, this is really a great kind of solution for keeping mom or dad in the home, but also getting them the help that they need.
But also look at it the other side. As the older adult, they don't want to have to depend on their children. They want to stay independent. And so this is still like, this is my, my village. I can call and I can get this, or I can go to this program. It really is being as independent as you and on your terms. I think that's the premise of a lot of the way people join, villages,
Yeah, I love that. You still have kind of control over your life, right?
It is control. Right.
Yeah, even though you need more help. So tell us a little bit about now how it works, because obviously the neighbors have to get together and they kind of form this association or village or whatever. I know you, as the Village Network, from a national perspective, have a lot of templates and a lot of guidelines on here are some of the things that have worked for others or best practices and some things like that. But tell us, what costs are involved, how just that part of it works.
Well, I mean, you have to go back to, you hit the nail on the head, Sherri. It really is organically grown from the community. So you have a bunch of folks that, have the like mindset, and it might be a group of homeowners, who live in the small community and they're like, let's investigate this. The National Network, who I represent, is a membership organization, and we help villages start up. We have, as you said, documents, we have a toolkit. We're actually about to release in the next, I don't know, about 8 weeks, a new startup guide, which is a smaller, condensed version. And we will be distributing that for free into communities through some of our, partner organizations, ARP, US Aging, which is, the Area Agency on Aging's parent organization, senior centers. But it's started to evolve, and not just a community of neighbors doing it, but also organizations starting to do a village. We have senior centers, we have faith-based, we have some great churches that are like, we love this concept and this model, and we want to start it within our congregation. And so we're seeing an uptick of that. And as you mentioned, housing, we have a low-income housing NORC, as you call it, out in Oakland, California, that they created a village within their own, building. So they're taking it. And so what we do is step by step help them along the way by mentoring them with the village toolkit. It is a process. I will say it takes about upwards of 2 years to roll from start to finish. The expenses that they'll eventually incur are, application for a 501c3, which most of my villages are nonprofits, and that's how they either raise money, get grant money, donations. But it is a financial funder for a lot of our villages. And then looking at the governance, it's a very thorough process, but it does take time. And then the biggest thing is looking at, what I call a needs assessment. It's looking at what's in the community existing, because you don't want to duplicate services, and what's missing, and how can you complement and work together. So a lot of it's legwork. It's going to the local senior center and saying, can we do some programs with you? Can, going to I had a great supporter when we were, started my village in Virginia. He was a county supervisor. His name is Jerry Highland. And unfortunately, he just passed like a couple of weeks ago. He just loved it. And he had a town hall meeting for us, and we did a survey. He helped us do a survey. So these are the local people who realize, what are we doing the next stage of our life? What, okay, I'm living life. I'm living plan A. What's plan B? What am I going to do in 10 years? Where am I going to be? How am I going to do that? Do I have, let's say I have some visual impairments right now. What's that going to be in 10 years? Am I going to be able to drive? So people really need to start planning. And I have to say, I think villages are not governmental. They're not a for-profit. They're really very simply a grassroots model, and people trust it. And, a lot more. And as we look at, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle, we have some serious, issues as we move forward about how we're going to support our older adults. Community-based services are the way to go. And, we're more public than the public health department. So it's a really great alternative if you have one in your community, or just start one.
I think that's the big message, and most caregivers know this out there, but we talk a lot about national programs or certain supports, but it really comes down to the local, what are those local services and helps that that help that you can get. You mentioned one thing, and I have to admit, as a single woman who is getting older, and I really appreciate the light bulb, and I had batteries that needed to be replaced in my smoking parts the other day. Getting up on a ladder and kind of looking up and then looking down, just not a good thing. And very often I like to go to my neighbors and find out like who's a good handyman or whatever, because I know you can go on TaskRabbit and some of these other apps, but I don't really know the person. So what do you do, if anything, to kind of vet the folks, maybe the vendors that you might be recommending or bringing in, whether maybe it's a plumber or a handyman or somebody like that that might come into the home. Is that part of the process?
It is. And I wouldn't call it vetting, but I would call it, looking to see, sort of shop local. Who's out there? And there's committees that are formed, and, from, the home health agencies, and actually interviewing them. And we had a reliable resource in our community. Believe it or not, it was a hardware store, and it was owner based. It wasn't one of the big chains. And the name of it was Village Hardware.
Ah,
I know, I loved
perfect.
it. I know it. And we could call there and go, you know what, I have a member who's looking for a handyman, and can you give me 2 names you recommend? And so we'd always keep a list, and the same with other vendors, we would keep a going list that members recommended. So the member recommended list, but also outside of that, going to, a plumbing agency and saying, will you give our members a discount, and so giving, working that local, yes, they want the business. So yes, they're going to work with a local nonprofit organization to help, older adults. It's a great win-win for everybody.
And obviously, the services the resident or the resident's family would be paying for. But in terms of this kind of coordination people, and you said there are some full-time people in some of the villages, is that then like a monthly dues or an annual dues? How does that typically work?
Every village is different. As I mentioned before, 60% of our villages are staffed. So there might be some dues, but I have villages that have no dues. I have villages that have what we call pay as you can. And it's sort of a sliding scale. Then we have villages that have, hefty dues, that are annually, or you can pay them monthly. I wouldn't say hefty, anywhere from, like 250 annually to 900. And it really just depends. But within that, you get all these services. I mean, and my old village did have, higher dues, but we determined, the biggest service request that we are asked is transportation. If this person was living at home and took a cab to the doctor once a month, it's $15 each way. There's $30. And you join the village, you have multiple opportunities to have volunteers take you to the grocery stores. And there's a lot more flexibility and peace of mind knowing that, all the volunteers, every one of them, are vetted. They are vetted. They have to go through a process. They have to go through a background check. They have to go through orientations. And then villages carry liability insurance on, their volunteers, and, those that are transporting, but also those that are going to their homes. So it's a reliable local resource that you can trust, which is the bottom line.
Yeah, I live in a community. I live in a townhome community, and we have an association, and they don't do any of these things for us. They're
Start a
mostly just
village.
taking care of landscaping and telling us what we can't do, like putting things on your balcony or whatever.
I know, I hear you. No, I mean, we have a couple HOAs that have started villages, and it is a great resource for those. I mean, I have one here. It is called Village by the Shore. And that's the other thing I know that you didn't ask about, but one of the things that villages are limited to is they don't do, medical support. They're, it's non-medical. So when people, and we have a aging population in our village movement, over 150 of my villages are 10 plus years old. That means if they were a founding member, like my founding members, they're in their mid 80s now. And pushing 90. And so one of the things the villages are looking at is the natural partnerships within a community, whether it's the, nursing home or memory care or adult day or, assisted living, the rehab centers, knowing what you have in your community that you can help, with your aging members. We call maybe vulnerable members, and really giving the support to the caregivers, to know what's out there. And it's also, state and county. I mean, what the resources are.
Right. And that's kind of part of the dilemma for caregivers. Survey after survey that I see, and I work with a lot of employers. One of the things that keeps coming back from the employees who are in caregiving situations is, I just want somebody to point me in the right direction, or, do the research for me and tell me, okay, is this the best or whatever. That seems to always bubble up to the top. That resource is so great. Now, tell us about how many villages are out there right now.
Currently, we have about 280 villages in 41 states that are open and operating, about 50 that are in development or exploratory stages. They're based, we have heavy concentrations in the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic, the Midwest, Chicago area, Pacific Northwest, and California. But there's other, areas. Florida's really starting to boom. And we have regional groups that are working with their state legislators to see if they can get funding. So there's a group in Maryland that's, hitting their state up for support funds. So it's also to help scale, because I wish we would scale faster, but it's, it is a process. I mean, I wish I heard somebody say, we only have 280 villages. We should have 1,000 villages. We should have a village in every city. I'm like, well, yeah, but that's it's not moving that fast. But
and it's also reliant on the residents themselves, right? I mean, that community has to embrace it.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't, we kind of talked about some of the questions I'd ask, and so I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball, but I'm curious because I live out here in Southern California. As you know, we experienced these horrendous wildfires, knock wood. I was not close to it, but had lots of friends and others that were affected. And then we know with the hurricanes, that happened recently, Helene and Milton. What I would imagine, and I'm just going to put this out there, having a village already set up would be such, again, a great peace of mind, because that there is somebody right there who's going to be thinking about your loved one, right? I mean, is that helpful?
Well, I'll tell you a little story, because I know we're time limited. Pasadena Village is a really good example of a community, but also a village that pulled together. So 22 of their members lost their homes. 90 were displaced. Of the 90, only about a handful had to go into, the public housing or whatever you want to, the shelters. The rest of them were housed by other village members.
Wow.
So the connection, and then the outpouring from other villages, money sending, they needed air purifiers, they needed, things. And so, when you do natural disasters, it's helpful to have this community already at hand, a network that is, a safe and, you can go to. It's amazing. And January, my heart and my head ached. And I think about how lucky the people in California were.
Yeah, seriously, to have that. Yeah, to have that backup in the face of all this tragedy and destruction and everything is phenomenal. Well, Barbara, we've covered so much. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you feel is important for our listeners to know?
You can start a village. Don't wait until 10 years when you're getting older. And I am like you, Sherri. I'm solo aging at this point. So you know what? Every day I look at, what am I going to do when I'm in 10 years? What are the supports? Because my kids live far away. So don't wait. That's the thing. And you can go to our website at www.v as in Victor, T as in Tom, V as in Victor, network.org. And you can scroll through there. You can see, there's a map. You can see if there's a village near you. There's a village locator map, or you can contact me directly at barbara.sullivan@vtvnetwork.org.
Which is phenomenal. And I told you our audience is primarily family carers, but we also get a lot of HR folks from employers listening. We also get a lot of companies that are out there that are supporting caregivers. Some of them are startups. in tech. But are you open to having
Oh, sure.
conversations with those groups? Okay, because I know
Always.
there's some that would be
Always.
very interested in really helping out and supporting what's going on with this village movement, which is great. Well,
We work with a lot, and the other thing that we didn't, and maybe this is the thing to walk away with, is we also are a big advocate. So we are working with national partners. We may be the small little organization, nationally, but you know what? We've got a mighty voice, and working with some of the leaders in the aging industry is refreshing and welcoming right now. So this is good.
absolutely. Well, Barbara, thank you so much for sharing all this valuable information. I know a lot of people haven't maybe heard about the villages, and so I think this opens our eyes to all of the different things that are out there. And I will probably be calling you because I'm thinking I want to start a village now in my community. I think we need it.
Okay, that sounds good. I like it.
All right. Well, Barbara, thank you again. Just been delightful having you on the podcast. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks.
Wasn't that a great interview with Barbara? I was so thrilled to have her on our episode because I've really wanted to have you guys learn more about this Village Network and how it can really help, as I said, our older loved ones, but those of us who are family caregivers as well. It's a great solution to helping our parents stay safe and socially active in their neighborhoods and stay in their homes as long as possible. So now switching gears to our Well Home Design news. As we heard, Village Network, great solution. One of the things that I think is kind of exciting, having been in this space of aging and caregiving and longevity for more than 25 years now, are all the choices and options that are out there. Now, sometimes we talk about choice overload. I talk about that's a stressor sometimes for those of us, for all of us, but particularly family caregivers. But the fact that we do have a lot more of these choices is really great because, again, there is no one size fits all to the lifestyle that our older loved ones want. There's no one size fits all for what our needs are as family caregivers. And so having these choices are really great. So as we heard, Village Network is something where you can keep your loved one in their home and in the neighborhood, obviously, as long as possible. But let's think about this. Let's say the neighborhood has really changed. Let's say some of the neighbors that your mom or dad or grandparents loved have moved out. Maybe they have gone to memory care, assisted living. Some of them have passed away. New people have moved into the neighborhood. Maybe the neighborhood itself has changed. Maybe there's a lot more traffic and congestion and business, right around the corner where it used to be a nice, quiet neighborhood. There's all kinds of things that can happen, particularly, think about it. If you've been living in your home for 40 or 50 years, that's a long time. That's a long time for things to change. So what if that's going on? And even though your loved one loves their home, because there are reasons we don't want to leave, right? We just absolutely love our home. Can't imagine leaving. It's where you raised your kids, did all these wonderful things, have all these great memories. But if the community and the neighbors and the neighborhood doesn't really support your loved one anymore, what are some of your options? Well, as we know, there are things like, senior living communities and assisted living. Now, senior living communities tend to be more active adults. Maybe some of them are connected to like golf course. They have a lot of activities going on. They're kind of almost like, I want to say it's like the bar scene for people in their 70s and beyond, right? Even though these active communities are for people 55 plus. Many of you, I think I've talked about before, the Latitude Margaritaville, which is based on the Jimmy Buffett lifestyle. So for aging parent heads out there, and that's located in places like Daytona Beach, Florida, a couple other places now that they have. And so it's got this kind of coastal living vibe, right? So that sounds kind of fun and interesting, but assisted living, quite frankly, the average age of people in assisted living tends to be in their early 80s. And memory care tends to be somewhat similar. And so memory care is something where you're not really making the decision to move there. It's more required because you do have Alzheimer's, you're in the end stage or whatever it happens to be. Assisted living, though, you might still be okay, but you need a little bit of help. Maybe you need help with a medication or, just getting dressed and things like that. And it's hard to stay in your home. And so what do you do? So there's something happening, and this is one of the choices. It's not quite there yet because they're just going to build their first community this year, but it has been tapped as one of the growing trends in how we're going to, live as we age. And it's called, I thought this was interesting, Cozy Home Communities. I love that cozy home. First of all, that just like attracts me immediately. Now this is for people who are over the age of 65 who are what we call the forgotten middle, which is all of us middle class people who don't have a bundle of money, but also are not obviously going to be eligible for things like Medicaid, which helps pay for a lot of the different services and facilities and things that you can choose from. So the communities are interesting because you move into these prefab homes. They're smaller. They're 2 bedrooms, 2 bath, about 1,200 to 1,400 square feet or so. But it's where you decide, okay, I want to go to a certain place, and they have shared interests, similar backgrounds, but the neighbors all volunteer to help each other out. So you really go because you want to be part of that community. And what they're marketing it as is joyful living at modest, affordable prices. Now you're renting instead of buying. So same thing as if you were going to assisted living, you would be renting essentially, right? Because you're going to pay month to month. When you go to places like Latitude, Margaritaville, and like the villages that we talked about earlier, not the Village Movement, but the villages in Florida, you can actually purchase homes, but also rent in those communities, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, this is more of a rental. But it's more for people in their 60s and 70s who are still somewhat active or semi-active. You might need a little help in the home. But again, you need a handyman. Maybe one of the neighbors can come over and fix your light bulbs or do whatever. If you love gardening, maybe you tend, the garden and take care of that for the neighbors. So, stuff like that. You don't have to take care of all the landscaping, gardening in the community because the community does handle some of those things. Anyway, I just find it kind of interesting because I do think that this is something that could be of interest for a lot of people, moving into a place where their peers are there and they have shared interests, similar things. The first one, by the way, of these cozy home communities is going to be in Pennsylvania, opening this year. But they're already building in North Carolina, Florida, Montana. There were a couple other states that I forgot. But, there's several other states that are going to be opening in the next year or two. So, interesting, something to just check out. Just know that the options keep building every day for where we can live as we age, and this might be something that fits, particularly for, I think, sometimes our loved ones who are solo aging. They've either lost their spouse, you lost your mom and dad, or they've lost their second spouse or whatever it happens to be, or they're widowed, widower, or divorced. And so this gives them that social life as well, and feeling connected again to a community where they may not be feeling that in their neighborhood. So it's kind of interesting. And turning to the Kitchen and Bath International Show, big, huge Kitchen and Bath Show, happens in Vegas every year. I got an insight into, because it's going on actually next week, I think. So I got some early news from the people who put this on. They shared with me some of the top trends that are going to be showcased at the show. So I want to be able to share that with you. And what I found is 3 out of their 5 top trends have to do with basically aging and maybe caregiving. So the first one is cultural and family history design. And this is really bringing what they call nostalgic design into the home. And so, Grand Millennial was a trend I wrote about a few years ago. And if you think of Grand Millennial style, that's where you kind of raid your parents' or your grandparents' attic or basement, and you upcycle some of the stuff that they have. The goddess of Grand Millennial style, by the way, is Erin Napier, the star of HGTV's Hometown. She is the goddess of that upcycling and Grand Millennial style. But also it's something like maybe, taking older photos of generations of your family and doing a gallery wall. So you kind of bring that connection for your kids into their history and their genealogy or something like that. There was another HGTV show, I think it was Fixer to Fabulous, Jenny and Dave Mars, love them. They took a Singer sewing machine, I think it was, and they turned it, somebody had it. They loved it, but they weren't sewing anymore. They turned it into a desk or whatever, but it still had the sewing machine, the old Singer sewing machine look to it underneath. Anyway, cool stuff like that. So this nostalgic design is really big. And then adaptable with style. Okay, so this is not your grandma's grab bars anymore, folks. There is such beautiful stuff out there that allows us to be accessible and safe, particularly in things like the bathroom where 80% of falls occur, but it looks gorgeous. It's like part of the design. So whether it's the hydrotherapy with the walk-in tubs, whether it's the no step entry into showers that also have a little seat, also have controls at different levels. So you could be seated and turn on the shower and grab the shower head. You know, don't always have to stand up. You could do that seated, all those kinds of, those are kind of like trending for everybody. It's not just for older people. It's for people who are like, hey, you know, I do want to live here a long time. I know I'm going to get older. I got to think about this stuff. So that's, you know, some of the stuff is just absolutely beautiful and good lighting sources. The lighting companies, you know, whether it's the Philips and Kohlers and so many others are doing great things with lighting. And then the third that I love is the outdoor integration, blending indoor, outdoor, bringing, you know, nature inside. That was a big part, by the way, of my Me Time Monday book. I talk about biophilic design, which is really what that trend is known as. And it's also now going to be my third book, The Snug Home. But it's really about, you know, integrating the five senses into nature and bringing that inside, because it helps us, you know, kind of just supports our sense of living and thriving. And even if you're older, you know, we've talked about this numerous times about having plants and things inside. And then I just wanted to do, again, I just felt validated. Because when I first came up with the name The Snug Home, and I shared it with a couple of friends, they're like, I don't get it. And I was like, how could you not get it? The Snug Home, right? Come on. Anyway, it resonated with me. And as you read on the Snug Home blog page on my Caregiving Club website, there's a story behind it. And it has to do with both my grandma as well as my stepdad, who was in the Navy. And the Snug Home and the Snug have different meanings and have stories behind them. The Snug is a very famous, by the way, design in pubs in Britain. And so now what's happening, guess what? Guess what's the big trend? The Snug. And I just wanted to read this. I feel so validated out there. And I know my friends listen to this podcast. So haha, gotcha. The Snug Home. We were ahead of the trend. This was in the Wall Street Journal. Why Americans want a snug, a special room that's an instant magic pill of comfort. As sprawling, noisy, open concept floor plans prove divisive, some homeowners are adopting the British Snug, a small, comfy, den-like space where a television doesn't dominate the decor or the vibe. Okay, so that's kind of more of that traditional snug. Now, I talk about the Snug Home being cozy everywhere. It is an open floor concept, and it is other things, but you can still create that sense of cozy sanctuary all throughout your home. It doesn't have to just be one space. I do talk about reading nooks, which can be that one space if you want it. But anyway, I just wanted to share that with you because I was really excited to read that the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times both had articles on the snug trend in home design. And again, that Snug Home, I'm trying to get it researched and written as quick as possible because it's a really fun one for me. This whole home design concept is really nifty. And it's about, again, making our spaces, healing spaces and wellness spaces as much as, you know, just functional for us as shelter and as our homes. So thank you so much for listening to our February episode. We've got a lot of really great stuff coming up from March. I can't wait to share all those things with you, but we really appreciate you listening. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on whatever channels you listen on. And again, you know, we just really appreciate all of our listeners out there. And again, happy National Caregivers Day, February 21st. Celebrate you. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for joining us on this episode. A reminder, you can find more information in my book, Me Time Monday, The Weekly Wellness Plan to Find Balance and Joy for a Busy Life, or visit MeTimeMonday.com or CaregivingClub.com. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Caregiving Club on Air. Please hit the subscribe button to listen to us on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, SiriusXM, iHeartRadio, Pandora, as well as other listening channels. Check out all the resources and article links on our episode guide page at caregivingclub.com. Just hit the podcast tab at the top and email us with comments and questions at podcast@caregivingclub.com. Thank you again for listening, and take care and stay well.